The Hop Edition podcast is brought to you in association with Brew Keg Tap, the number one choice for all your beer dispense and kegging needs, and specialists in the supply of Kegland brewing equipment to the UK market. So next time you're in need of taps, kegs, or anything with a Zilla on the end, get over to brewkegtap.co.uk and tell them the Hop Edition sent you. We would also like to thank all our patrons for their continued support with running and developing the pod. If you would like to become a member and gain access to exclusive perks and benefits, head over to patreon.com/the Hop Edition podcast. Now pour yourself a cold one and enjoy the episode. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 67 of the Hop Edition podcast. Tonight we've got two very special guests joining us from Muntons. So many of you will be familiar with the name from them providing the kind of gateway products for getting most of us into homebrewing, I guess, for want of a better description. And a load of other things that they're going to tell us all about tonight that they do as far as malting, malt-related products, and the beer kits and everything else that is produced out at the maltings that Muntons runs. So, just very quickly before we get into the intros from everyone, we want to say a thank you to our latest Patreon, who is Toby Coates. So thank you very much, Toby, for joining us on the Patreons, and we appreciate your support and the support from all our other Patreons and our sponsor. So let's get into the podcast. First of all, I'd like to welcome Ken and Nick to the pod, and we'll do our usual thing and just quickly whip round and let you say hello, introduce yourself, and also tell us what you have in the glass tonight. So should we start with Ken?
Hi, I'm Kenneth Maxfield. I'm the General Manager of Homebrew at Muntons, and I am currently drinking Northern Monk's Rocket Lolly, which I like to choose a beer that Muntons supply malt to that brewery, and it's the first time I've tried this, but it's actually quite a nice beer. I'm not sure, I don't really remember what Rocket Lolly tastes like, to be fair, as an ice cream, so it's difficult to tell, but it's quite a pleasant beer. Yeah, nice fruit flavours.
Have I seen that one in a supermarket? Is that?
I think it might be Sainsbury's. I think it might be a Sainsbury's. I don't know if it's only Sainsbury's, but certainly that's where I got it. And but yeah, it's a nice one for the summer.
I'd just like to point out that beer is the reason why my kids have Rocket Lollies in the freezer right now. Because in Sainsbury's, you go round, you go through the craft beer section, which is literally one thing wide. It's pointless. And then you go down about 50 feet and on the right-hand side, the Rocket Lollies.
Yeah, I actually picked up Rocket Lollies as well today, Chris. It must be a themed.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Nick.
Hi. I'm Nick Piper. I work in product development and I'm a brewing technologist for Muntons. My role's quite varied. So, part of it's homebrew, so working on the kits that we produce, but also sort of brewery support for our brewing customers, distilling customers as well, and then some more sort of general problem solving within our factory. And tonight I am drinking Tribute.
Oh, nice!
Because it's very sessionable. It's a good pale ale in my book. Nice and citrusy.
Nice classic.
Yeah, absolute classic. Okay, so I will start for us. I've got a New Zealand Pilsner that I've brewed, and it's an evolution of a previous recipe that I've done. I've just swapped out the kind of supporting hop to Sapphire in this one, so Nelson and Sapphire.
Oh, nice.
It's pretty good. It's maybe, I'm not sure if it's my favourite kind of combo for this beer.
Yeah.
The hop bitterness is maybe a little bit astringent on this one, but it's fairly young, so that might settle out. But yeah, still enjoying my New Zealand Pilsner.
Yeah, I always try and hit a target IBU of 18 tricky, and then when I've got like that 40-50 gram dry hop, it actually brings quite a lot of bitterness to the beer, because it's with that kind of New Zealand pils, it can it can quite quickly override it. So
Yeah,
it's
that
a good
Nelson flavour
point.
can be quite aggressive as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the hops that just takes over.
So what are you drinking, Andy?
So because I'm in the house tonight, I'm not at the kegerator. I've got some Fierce. It's their hazy IPA, which is, I think it's very much like a Citra beer. It's nice and kind of light and sessionable type. So it's really nice.
Lovely.
Good.
Owen. He's
Good
nose
evening,
deep
everyone.
in that glass, so it must
Yeah,
smell
I
good.
am. I was drinking this yesterday. I was having some sulphur notes off it, and I concluded that after then drinking that beer and then drinking a beer from Burnt Mill in the same glass, I think it might have been the glass, because I'm not getting it now. Weird. Anyway, this is my low ABV pale. Surely getting to the end of the keg. I've reviewed this plenty of times on the podcast, so I shall pass over to Chris.
Well, thanks, Owen. This is the beer that you lot haven't yet named. We've got a competition running at the minute. If you want to win that Firmzilla with the Ultimate Pressure Kit, get onto the Hop Edition, find that thread that our social media manager has been pumping so impressively. Get your funny name down. I have 2 for me that are currently in the running, okay? And somebody's going to have to come up with something good to beat those 2, but give it your best shot, because like our competition that we did last year, we want everybody to have a shot. If you're not currently pressure fermenting, you currently don't have the ability to do oxygen-free transfers, you need to get on and you need to name this beer. Okay, this is it's my nipple base, so it's a New England pale India lager, fruity hoppy thing, which Tricky won't let me call an IPL. Because he's a pain in the ass. And basically, it's just a fruit bomb. It's an absolute fruit bomb. Loads and loads of like passion fruit and a little orange, which is, quite good. But it's got that hedgerowy kind of centennial, lemony, grapefruity zing with the hedge fruity berry kind of thing. It's just a great beer. It's really nice. Tastes lovely. Bloody should do for the amount of hops in it.
Excellent. So that's everyone's beers, isn't it? We have done everyone. Okay. So yeah, I gave a pretty poor attempt at explaining what Muntons do. So Ken, do you want to give us the sort of overview of Muntons as a company, a little bit of background? And
yeah. So Muntons is based in Stowmarket in Suffolk, and we have malting processes there and ingredients processes, which I'll come on to in a minute. We also have a site in Bridlington, Yorkshire, another maltings, and a peating plant at Tithe Top in Yorkshire. And we also have, predominantly for the food industry, a facility in Thailand as well, which produces malted milk type products. We've been around over 100 years. We celebrated our 100 years in 2021, although it got slightly delayed, pushed back a bit, the celebrations, due to COVID. And we essentially produce a range of products, of which homebrew kits are one of them, and the malts we produce are another. But we produce malts for brewing and distilling, craft breweries, international distillers. We have various types of malting plant. We have drum maltings. We have a couple of larger Saladin box maltings. But we also produce a lot of products that are made from the malt we make that go into the food industry. So it's pretty likely that you will have eaten something containing a Muntons product over the last week or so, through biscuits, chocolates, confectionery, baked goods. We do a range of liquid extracts, dried extracts, flours and flakes alongside the malt and the homebrew kits that we do. So quite a wide range, but predominantly focused in that sort of food and brewing part of the business. And Muntons Homebrew is a part of that process, and we produce a range of homebrew kits and spray malts and other things that we like to see homebrewers using to make their beers.
Brilliant. So I know there's quite a wide range of brands kind of under your homebrew sort of output. So is it kind of most of the kits in the UK that are actually coming out from Muntons, or which?
Well, there's very
names are
few
yours?
manufacturers who make malt extract. So there's a strong likelihood that there'll be Muntons products in some of those kits. We have a wide range of brands. Those of you who've done kit brewing either now or in the past will recognise brands at the sort of maybe the budget end, the sort of Geordie products or the Tom Caxton products, and then the Muntons products themselves, the premium connoisseurs range, right up to the flagship range, which we put out reasonably recently, and the taproom products, which are trying to touch more on the sort of craft side of the homebrew market, while still recognising that it's an extract brewing product. We do a number of third-party products, both UK and around the world. So it's it's possible that your kits are containing Muntons products. And again, there's very few people who make spray malt and other products like that. So it's we're pretty big in the production of extract kits and pushing more now the sort of move for people to consider extract for other things than just kits. I mean, we obviously focus on the kits. It's a large part of our business, but we recognise that a lot of people, a lot of your listeners will be and viewers will be all malt brewers, and we do think there's opportunities for extract to form part of your brewing process through the launch of various ingredients ranges that we did recently, and also bringing Muntons malt to home brewers, which has been probably historically a little bit more difficult to find. So we're really pleased that you should start seeing Muntons malt available in some of the homebrew shops from now on, where it's been missing for a little while.
Yeah, because one of the things I suppose that as a all grain brewer we use is like dry malt extract for doing all our starters and stuff like that. And I've seen products now where you can just get a can and almost just pour it straight in. You know, that it's the quickest way to just get your starters going. So
yeah, that's not a Muntons product, but I mean it's a good example of where people are using a pre-prepared wort, if you like, to do part of the brewing process. And I think from Muntons' perspective, I say we focus a lot on the kit products, and we anticipate that a lot of our users will continue to make kits, and we try and make them to the best we can, so they can match some of the other beers out there. And I think a lot of it is about the other processes that people are running in their homebrew setup that will impact the beer that you get. And I know that extracts sometimes get a bit of a sort of a bad rap, particularly if it's, I don't know, a little bit older, or it's been sitting around for a bit, and it can sometimes pick up a little bit of colour. But we think we offer a range of products to all grain brewers who may, or brewers who are on the sort of cusp of switching between extract and all grain and not quite sure how they want to carry on their brewing. Maybe want to start developing their own recipes, maybe build from kits. And we're not really precious about how people brew the product. You can buy one of our kits and you can add whatever you want to it and swap the yeast and add different bits and pieces. But
pump it up.
Yeah, and I think it's a really easy way to make homebrew.
Yeah. Really easy. Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's cool.
Nick, do you want to add anything on that side of things?
I don't know. I need to say, I suppose, that the malting side of things is really sort of the hub of the business, and then it sort of fans out from there in terms of supplying malt for homebrew, for brewing, and then obviously homebrew will be an element of that now, and for distilling, and then a large proportion for processing further into malt extracts, an element of that for homebrew, an element of that for wider sort of food products, and then flours and sort of malt pieces, flaked malt, all sorts of bits and pieces that go to make up sort of the Muntons portfolio, which I think is one of the aspects that makes Muntons a little bit different to most other maltsters. That we have those sort of two sides to the business. Most concentrate purely on malt for brewing and distilling.
Yeah, and I think also that with malting, there's a real difference in scale. I mean, you had a while back, you had the Crafty Maltsters on, clearly a much smaller operation, and far smaller than us. But we're probably in the top 20 maltsters in the world, but we're by no means anywhere near the big maltsters who are churning out, millions of tons of malt. So there's quite a wide spectrum, and a lot of it just depends where the companies are focusing their products. We traditionally haven't offered many malts to the homebrew market, although our kits have been a mainstay of the market for a long time. But we're hoping now that can be a little bit more accessible to homebrewers who hopefully can see our malts in different shops.
So which malts are we likely to see kind of coming to market for the homebrew?
You should see a range of sort of fairly standard malts, so lagers, pilsners, pale ales, probably a couple of varietals in terms of the pale ale malt, super pale ale malt. I think one shop I know that definitely has it at the moment is the homebrew shop in Farnborough. So if you look on their website, they've taken quite a wide range of our malts. But we think that'll start to spread to other retailers as well now within the market and give people a bit more choice on malt, although we recognise there is already quite a lot of choice out there as it is.
Is there, Ken, is there anything that Muntons offer from a malt perspective that perhaps other maltsters don't? Is there anything that, could get some of our listeners excited about? I know you talked about that super pale malt. I mean, how pale is that?
I don't know the specification off the top of my head, but super pale was available at one point and maybe still is at the malt miller. And it was virtually the only malt that was taken, you could buy of Muntons in the market, which I think indicates a little bit maybe the niche that product sat in. But essentially, it's a very, very, what's the word, sort of carefully treated malt from the kilning perspective, and in the malting process, just to try and keep that colour as low as possible for
it's a
ultra-light
very,
beers.
very good product for specifically for lagers and for heavily hopped beers.
Nippers.
It really allows a lot of those hop, sort of particularly citrus notes, to shine through, and it's significantly lighter than most other malts you find. Sort of sits 2 or 3 EBC lower than your standard sort of lager and pilsner malts. The only thing I would say is that anyone trying out that is best advised to use a stepped mash if they can, because it is on that sort of low modification end. It does work very well, and we have a big sort of fan base of that within the commercial setting. But in a homebrew setting where I know a lot of people are perhaps relying on infusion mashing, then they might have to sort of step a little bit carefully with that.
So if they're relying on infusion massing, they really need to get a craft beer pie system. That's all I've got to say.
So you're talking about protein rest then, Nick, are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, you're going to get a very hazy beer, in effect.
You might get a bit of haze. You might get stuck. You might get some slow runoff. There are ways to remedy it, but it's more advised with steps. But it doesn't mean you couldn't do it with a single mash.
Sounds like an exciting malt for your like you said, your lagers, like American light lagers, and something you're looking for that really clear, really light coloured beer. Almost some American light lagers. One of our listeners.
I would have said it's like Nippers, because the when you go up to that 7-8%, the amount of colour, you really do want to try and get the lightest type of malt as a starter if you're wanting that kind of nice bright sort of
Is it kind of the same sort of? Is it the same sort of colour range as like the extra pale Marisotta, or is it even lighter than that?
Lighter than that, I would say.
Wow.
Yeah, you're probably.
That's like 3 EBC.
Yeah.
It is around sort of the 3 to 4 EBC. Yeah.
But
I don't have the specification off the top of my head, but it's.
Hey, I've got the internet. I could pull that up.
So as Nick touched on, it's really, it's difficult to make a malt that light.
Yeah.
And keep it away from being barley. So it's quite carefully sort of handled through the process.
Yeah.
And just touching on Owen's point about sort of products that might be different to the market. I mean, it is a little bit of a challenge, even as a top 20 malts in the world, but relatively small in that scale, we're still talking about sizable batches to make even individual products. So whilst we might make some products for commercial brewing or craft brewing that have a particularly specific specification, translating that into a homebrew setting can be quite difficult because the sheer volume. Even our drums, our smallest process, would make probably 20 tons of malt. So that's and you want your malt to be as fresh as you can as you're using it. So it's the balance of developing products and taking products from a commercial setting into a homebrew setting is sometimes a little bit impacted by the numbers involved in terms of taking those brews across.
Is it the extra pale planet? Is that the one?
No,
you're
it's called
talking about?
Super. It's called Super Pale. I'm not sure. I think it is on the Malt Miller website. Although they don't have very much left when I looked.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's on the homebrew shop website yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm looking on your website.
Oh, on our website.
Yeah, this one.
It should be called Super Pale Malt. It's not the extra pale.
This one.
Yes, that looks like the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the one.
Yeah, there's no pictures and no videos, so I'm fairly sure that doesn't exist based on YouTube's idea. I'm joking, by the way. It's clearly there. So are we putting that sort of at the point with like lager malts, extra pale, that kind of like the real super mega light end?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
But we understand that's the lightest product available on the market.
So I was lucky enough to actually come down and visit you guys at the malting. So when you sort of mentioned previously about like drum malting, Saladin boxes and all the rest of it, I've got, well, I can just about remember what some of that means. But for the benefit of our listeners, would you be able to sort of just give us a quick run through of that sort of process from barley coming in to getting to the point where it's something that you can then either send out as grain or start converting into the other products that we've mentioned so far?
Yeah, I mean the malting process is very similar, whichever maltings you go to, and actually when you have the crafty maltsters on, they touched on something right at the start, which is really important, and that's before you even go into the malting process, and that's the barley that you're bringing in to malt. I mean, clearly in their situation, they're growing all their own barley, so it's a little bit different. But we would source our barley typically from within a 50-mile radius of the site itself. And our sites are situated in prime barley growing areas. We don't actually restrict ourselves to that. If we needed to bring barley in from other places, we could do. But we tend to find that those regions bring certainly the vast majority of what we need. And maybe it's coming from slightly further afield in the UK, but we would very rarely have to import any barley. But essentially, we're looking at the quality of the barley when it arrives, what's the nitrogen level, and a lot of that can be influenced by the crop growing. So we're keeping an eye even now on next year's crop, what the levels are going to be like, what's being planted, where it's being planted. The nitrogen level of the barley is key. Whether it's alive, and it sounds a stupid thing to say, but we have to check the barley will grow, the viability of the barley when it comes in. So we go through quite an intensive intake process in terms of understanding what size the grains are they uniform, are they going to grow? If they're not going to grow, we do have some options outside the malting sphere, so we can use those in some of our malt extracts that are made from raw barley. We have some food products that are made from raw barley, so we can avoid those products being sent away completely and bring those into our other processes. But from a malting perspective, we're really looking for has it been grown well, has it been handled well, and we will then the first thing we'll do is dry that barley down if it's above sort of 12% moisture. We're going to be storing that for quite a long time. We need to make sure it's been handled correctly. And the drying process has to be done quite carefully because you need that barley to grow during the process. So once we've stored it for a while and it will break its dormancy, barley has a natural dormancy, which means you can't just malt it straight away. It needs to have time to be ready to be malted. We'll then go into the first stage proper of the malting process, which is steeping. So as you'll notice as we go through this whole process of malting and also of the brewing side and spray malt and the other things we're going to talk about, there's a lot of getting things wet and then letting them dry again in the malting and brewing processes, or malt extract processes. So the first thing we do is soak that barley in water and allow it to take in the water, so it can effectively trick it into thinking it's growing in the field. Because we need that barley to do some work for us to get the enzymes moving around the grain, breaking down the cell, able to break down the cell walls during germination, and start to turn itself into malt effectively. So first stage is to steep it. That will take a couple of days. We'll put some water on it, around about probably, I don't know, 12, 13 degrees C, something like that. We'll give it some rest where it can have some air, because it needs to take the CO2 away, because it's essentially respiring and growing. Once that process is finished, it's taken up the moisture it needs to take up. We'll then let it go into our germination boxes or our drums, depending on the process. And that's essentially where we recreate the ideal conditions for that barley to start to grow. It will imagine it's in the field. It will start to do all the things it needs to do to turn itself into a growing plant. And that process, over a number of days, the barley will be turned to make sure it doesn't mat together. And Rich, I think you did a video of our maltings, and there's some videos of the boxes there as the turners go down. And
I did. Thanks for pimping the video on my behalf. I don't have to get them in myself now.
And yeah, at the end, that's the key bit for us in germination, is to make sure it doesn't go too far. We want the barley to release the enzymes, break down the cell walls, start to break down the proteins, but we don't want to start using the starch, because that's what we need later on to convert into sugar. So it's a fairly sort of standardized process once it gets going, but every time we change crop year, we have to work out how the barley best responds to the steep water, how it responds to the germination. So things can change depending on the type of product we're making, and also the crop year we're dealing with. Once we've gone through the germination process, so that's 3 or 4 days, we will be then up to 5 days, we'll then be into the kilning process. So we've let the barley grow, we've broken down the cell walls, we've broken down the proteins, we've allowed it to grow, to generate enzymes, develop enzymes inside the grain. We want to now stop that, so that the brewer can take that grain and use it and convert the starch into sugar during the mashing process. So we go through a kilning process, which essentially will ultimately kill the grain. That barley will not be alive at the end of the malting process. But again, we have to be careful. We want to maintain those enzymes, so we have to go fairly low temperatures when we kiln it. Quite a lot of air flow through to really dry it out. And then really towards the end of kilning is where you'll start to see some differentiations between the different malts that are produced and what they can be used for. So ale malts will typically be kilned at a slightly higher temperature towards the end. You're looking for slightly darker colors, slightly more complex color development. Lager malts will be slightly lower temperature, maybe down at sort of 85 degrees C rather than 95 degrees C, just to try and maintain the low color and maintain the enzymes that are there. So, and there's lots of different tunes the maltsters play on different products that are going through, different varieties. If it's for distilling, it has different characteristics. There'll be different barley bought for specific scenarios, really. Yeah, and essentially that will then go through to our malt storage, and it will go either onto our factory to be produced into the liquid malt extract that will then go into homebrew or the extract, or it will go off to major brewers in 20-ton containers, line containers, all around the world, or in 20 sacks for brewing either around the UK. That's the product you'll see in all the 25 kilo bags.
Yeah. See the distilling malt. What is the main difference between that and standard kind of brewer's malt? Is it that it's got more extract but less flavour, or what's the situation with that?
For distilling, the distiller wants a maximum amount of extract, maximum amount of sugar. So we're sourcing barley with lower nitrogen levels. We are not allowing the modification, which is the process in the germination where the enzymes are breaking down the internal structure of the barley. We don't want that to go too far, because whilst that's happening, the barley kernel is using those energy reserves, that extract that we would use for brewing or distilling, it's using that to grow roots, to grow shoots. So we look to avoid that. So it would be light in colour and low in nitrogen.
Does that have does that have a flavour impact?
It's hard to really ascertain whether it does, because you're using them for different purposes. So if you were to use distilling malt for brewing, then you would notice a difference. You'd probably end up with something very grainy. But of course, for distilling, because so many of those flavors that you get are volatile, the actual flavor from the grain is not so great and not so important, unless you are you're making some quite volatile compounds within the malt that can carry over through your still.
Yeah, because I've heard of in the past they used to use Golden Promise for distilling at one point, or for certain batches. But that's interesting.
I knew that bloke who kept spamming. It was on YouTube, were full of shit. Sorry, I did make a promise to myself I wasn't going to swear very much on this podcast. I'm a sailor. Well, I'm not a sailor, but I swear like one. I'm sorry.
30 minutes.
That guy, just what a muppet. Yeah. One question that I have when it comes to the actual malting process, what is the time frame from the point where you begin the kilning to the point where you go, let's say for, I don't know, standard pale malt, Marisol, or whatever. What is the period from when you begin the kilning process to the point where you're like, right, it's done, we can bag this?
I think kilning is typically within a day. I mean, it does depend a bit on the product you're making and how gentle you've got to be with it, because essentially you're trying to take it from quite a high moisture product to a low moisture product. Whatever happens during that process, you've got to get that moisture out. You can't have malt at high moisture for a number of reasons. One being storage, but also processing reasons in the brew houses. But I think the cutoff point between how much you can put in early on, how much temperature you can put in early on and still get the product at the end will determine how long that takes. I mean, if you take it to a sort of extreme, something like we don't do this at Muntons, but something like a crystal malt will be kilned a lot higher early on, because you're not really looking for to save the enzymes. You're looking for those sort of stewed flavors to come through. So if you imagine you took a wet grain and really heated it, you're going to get quite a lot of heat into the grain, but not a lot of moisture out. So I think I'm not entirely sure exactly on our cycle time how long the process is at the moment, but it's certainly all within a day to get that process through. But it just depends how long you're going pre-break effectively, and once you've got past that critical moisture level, you can then really start to ramp the temperature up a bit, but you still got to protect the enzymes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think typically you're looking at kilning being almost a two-stage process, where if you imagine the sort of the barley kernel as it's elongated, a bit like a rugby ball, that the inside of the grain is going to stay sort of damp and a much higher moisture level than the outside early on. So first stage, you're looking to drive those moisture levels down with high airflow rather than temperature. And then you can sort of ramp that temperature up to really drive off the last of that moisture. But depending on what product you're making, really determines how much you're looking to save the amount of enzymes that are present within the malt, how much you're looking to, maybe you don't care about that and you're just looking for a particular flavor profile because you're making a specialist malt like, say, Munich or Crystal, as Kenneth mentions.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because even if you've been watching, was it Clarkson's Farm? They go into the detail how important it is for the moisture of the malt, and they're testing it, and before they even go out and try and harvest it, and then it's like try to avoid the weather and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. And Alison even started, when she was on, she was talking about how, like you guys were saying earlier, about having to dry the malt and the cost that brings as well to, you're just trying to avoid moisture in the malt at all times.
I mean, as I said at the start, you're essentially wetting it and drying it a lot of times, and that takes energy,
which is expensive just now.
And it does have an impact on the malt, and you guys would have seen the price of not just malt, but everything really going up. But that is a large part of it, and you're right about the farming aspect of it. I mean, obviously, someone like Alison's a lot closer to it than I am from a Muntons perspective, but the weather in the region, whether it rains enough, too much, too little at the right times, it can really impact. And we will, damp barley is not a good thing to have, because you will get growth of various sort of mold and things on the grain, which we don't see the mold growth necessarily, but it can affect and can start to produce toxins. So we do a lot of testing at the intake when we bring things in to establish that the grain is really good enough to go forward and not going to give us any other issues. And a large part of that will be the moisture of that grain. If people try and bring in to any maltings really, grain which is too high moisture, they just won't be accepted.
Whose dog's eating the basket?
Guilty. Well, not mine, not guilty. He's guilty.
I recognise that sound. I had a Labrador as well. The whole. I mean, I understand the germination part. I understand the controlling moisture and all that. The only thing that I don't really understand, and I don't know if we're at this particular part, is, can you explain to me, because I have a few theories on this, and I've been known to be pie in the sky. However, I don't think I'm far wrong. When it comes to taking malted grain to wort, then to LME, and then to spray malt, what is the process, and how much are you avoiding oxygen during that process?
Nick, do you want to take the brew house part of it?
Yeah. So, in terms of oxygen, we don't have to work very hard, because if you're working primarily on the hot side, then it's less a consideration. In terms of making LME from the barley, we're milling it. From the malted barley, we're milling it down to a suitable grade. Then we're mashing it. We do that with stepped mash. So we're able to agitate, raise the temperature depending on the product that we're making, and it'll have various stands at those temperatures. We can then transfer that mash into a filter. So that works the same as if you were running a mash filter. Running a mash tun or a lauter tun. We run mash filters because it's a little more efficient. And basically, it's a separation process. So there we're able to hold the solids back and allow the wort to pass through into a wort tank. We sparge the solid grain, wash out the residual sugar. So then we've got our wort, which we can then carry through into our evaporator, which uses some heat, but mostly a vacuum, so that we are treating that wort quite carefully. Basically, it's what we term a falling film evaporator. So there's a series of tubes, and the wort, as it turns into a syrup, so it gets a lot thicker, but it's flowing down the insides of these tubes. The tubes are gently heated, but the air is drawn off the top, so that you're pulling that moisture out of the wort, and that will take it from the wort is about 20% sugar solids, and then we go to 80 roughly, depending on what we're making. And once that's made, it's still hot. We can then package it, or we can carry out a drying process such as spray drying, where we're looking for sort of lower sugar solids, around about sort of 66%, something like that. Reason for that is that we are passing that through a very fine nozzle. If it was too thick, it would jam that nozzle up and stop it from working. So the nozzle fires the extract into a tank and mixes it with air at the same time, so that you are drying that very, very quickly and turning it into a very fine powder. And then at the bottom of that tank, that conical, the dried malt extract can be collected and packaged that way.
We were talking about this on Wednesday, weren't we, Chris? About
Yeah.
we were trying to guess how you did it, because I think we were thinking it might have been done under pressure, and then we was like, is it high pressure, low pressure maybe? But then it's vacuum, so it's it's a kind of
sorry, I was going to say that the process of making liquid malt extract up to the wort stage is essentially a brew house process, same as any brewer or home brewer, other than the different bits of kit will change depending on scale. So it's really that bit, as Nick said, after we produce the wort, that differs from from anything else that you'll see.
I was more interested in the wort to powder or the wort to syrup, and exactly how it is that is done, because I mean, I'm a chemist. I mean, it says it in my name. And I was trying to work out how I do it, and I mean, Tricky said high pressure, and I'm like, that don't work. So it had to be low pressure to get everything off. But just the spray part, obviously spray malt, spray drying. But yeah, I had this like image in my head of like a candy floss machine.
Well, the spray drying process is very, very quick. So the wort we produce doesn't sit around very long. It goes from the process into the evaporator. So there's no sort of holding of anything. It's straight from that wort process into the evaporator. As Nick said, lower temperatures, under vacuum, and it gradually thickens through the process until you get what you would recognize as malt extract at the other end. From there, the spray drying process happens in seconds. The spray dry is dried at about 140 degrees C for about 3 or 4 seconds, and as the droplet is thrown into the chamber, it dries as a droplet. There's essentially a big cyclone of hot air going in. The atomizer spins and throws these droplets of it's about 66%. It's slightly, as Nick said, slightly sort of thinner than standard malt extract you expect from a can, but it throws it into the airflow, and by the time it goes through that process in the main chamber, it takes 3 or 4 seconds, and then another sort of 10 seconds to get through the rest of the process and cool down. You've taken that droplet of liquid and turned it into essentially a granule of powder, which is why spray malt's so fine. And I know that sometimes can give it some issues in terms of how it clumps if you don't get the right temperature of water as you're mixing it. It doesn't like steam very much. In fact, the whole process for spray drying has to be air conditioned from start to finish in the packing area, because it will try and absorb water at any stage.
Massive
You've probably noticed
when you cut it open your bag and then you don't seal it quite,
the crusty layer around the outside,
as it's pulling moisture
it's
out
trying to
there.
get back to its essentially its liquid malt extract form.
It's just as annoying as calcium chloride on that front. The drying process is really, really, really quick. And that, although you think that the high temperature, 140 degrees, it sounds hot, it's in there for so little time that there's really very little color pickup in that process. And once it's a powder, it's much more stable in terms of things like color and pH. Effectively, once you've got it as a dry powder, you could keep a sachet of spray malt in your cupboard unopened for 20 years, and it won't change much in the time. I'm
sure.
Time.
Did Mick Martin not do a test on that? I'm sure he tested. He found an old boots kit and made a beer from it.
Well, it's funny you say. I don't know if it's to do with the current sort of economic climate, but a number of times recently, people have got in touch with us and said, "I found an old kit," and we're talking brands that predate, Muntons getting into homebrew in some cases, or certainly the early days. Maybe not even Muntons brands, but I found a kit. Is it any good? And I mean, our advice is, it's probably not going to make the beer that you expect it to make. If it's 20 years old, that's not going to, that super pale lager is not going to be super pale anymore. But fundamentally there'll be nothing that extract will still ferment. And the solids of liquid malt extract and dried malt extract are such that it's really, really resistant to microbial growth. Not many things can grow in that. So I mean, so in some ways, if you have got an old kit, you've got nothing to lose. You try it. If it'll sometimes make a really complex beer, because that gradual caramelization over time of the extract, particularly on the liquid extracts, can give really sort of deep vine fruit sort of flavors. So if you're looking for like a Christmassy type beer or porter or
Raisin
something,
beer.
a stout will be fine for forever essentially. The only thing is whether the yeast will work. But even then, I mean, commercial yeasts for homebrewing are packaged in a really robustly. So as long as it hasn't been exposed to very, very high temperatures or extremes of temperature, then there's no real harm in trying that.
Yeah, we've been told you can freeze dried yeast and it will last forever, basically.
Yeah. Well, I suspect it probably affects your how vigorous the fermentation is, because maybe you haven't got the same viability as you would on a fresh.
Oh, you definitely
if you kept it forever, but it will still ferment. There's still sugar there, and the yeast will grow. If you like the problem is if you like a 20-year-old kit, you'll never be able to make it again unless you can find another 20-year-old kit, because you won't get the same flavour profile coming through other things. So
start stockpiling for your nuclear bunker.
Plus, all of the processes have improved. All of the ways that the barley is treated has been changed. Whether it's improved or not is personal preference, whatever. I mean, I'm sure technology-wise it has. The hops are completely different, and a lot of the yeast are now like proper. You're never going to be able to reproduce that beer, so you might as well give it a shot.
Yeah, and I think generally it turns out okay. It might not be exactly what it said it was going to be when you first started out, but it'll still make a nice beer. And in some ways, it's great that you can find a product 20 years old or 10 years. I mean, 20 years is a bit extreme to be fair, but 5-10 years old that will still function as a product, especially in the current climate where everyone's trying to save a bit of money. So I'm not suggesting everyone goes rooting through their cupboards to find a really old extract kit, because as you say, the new ones will be developed in a slightly different way, but don't chuck it out.
I mean, we've got a Scandinavian contingent who are listening to the podcast, so it's kind of like it's the stirstrumming, the fermented fish of the beer world, isn't it? Keep for 20 years.
Yeah, I think I haven't had it, but I understand it's a fairly sort of what's the word?
Robust aroma.
Yeah, I think you either like it or you hate it.
I mean, it's rotten fish, man. I'm probably going to hate it. I'll be honest with you. I'd take a punt on hating that. I was genuinely just quite interested in the process. I'm a process-based guy, okay? I don't drink that much beer, but I enjoy making it. I love the process. So knowing that, it's like, it basically is like making candy floss, just slightly drier.
Yeah, I suppose I haven't really thought of it in that respect, because we're always taking the air away, but I don't know, candy floss is essentially heated, isn't it? It's sugar that's been heated and sort of spun. So the sugar is changing. You're drying it out or changing it in that process. I would really hope our spray dryer never does start to produce something like candy floss, because that would be an absolute nightmare to try.
It would be a classic product for you to hit onto the market, though.
I don't think it come out the dryer.
Scrape it, be fine.
It would be stickier than any known candy floss in the market.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, Thomas has just replied. It's fermented, not rotten.
Yeah.
It will be gluing children to things.
I mean, when you launch that product, just say thanks. It's all good. Just send me a box. It's fine.
It'll be all the hipsters with their big beards getting it all stuck into it.
So I think before we go too far down that candy floss rabbit hole, what we were talking about before does lead us quite neatly into the actual process for making those liquid beer kits. So obviously, you've gone through how you get to the point of having liquid malt extract, but what happens when you're producing something specifically for a kit beer? So are you brewing like wort that is specific to certain kits in terms of the makeup of the grist that goes into that, or are you just blending, sort of different liquid malts together to create the the profile that you want, and then how do you get the sort of hop flavour into that? Because I assume that will be mainly through sort of extracts and things like that are added afterwards rather than going through that full process. So one for Nick,
Well,
maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, we can formulate a grist that is specific to what we want to produce, if that's the route we feel sort of is best to go down. That it's got it's very specific, particularly if we're working with a customer, like a particular brewer who wants to emulate their beer in a kit. Then we can try and do that. A lot of the initial ideas for beer kits is based around sort of feedback sessions that we would hold internally based on ideas from the market. So what are our distributors looking for? What are the current brewing trends? What do we see an awful lot of moving on supermarket shelves? And we can draw up a bit of a short list of ideas that we think could be a goer, and from there look to sort of have various rounds of testing. See, brewing with malt extract is slightly different to brewing sort of from scratch. So you're hampered in some respects, but we have the ability to go through various rounds of testing to get the formulation right. So we'll put brews on, taste them side by side. Sometimes just compare them against commercial beers that are on the marketplace, and that's really just part of our sort of internal system that sort of tries to deliver the best product each time. In terms of sort of getting the hops right, that can be very tricky because we aren't, because of the process that we run. Getting things like late hop character is really difficult because ordinarily you would treat your wort and at the end of the process, so it's post boil, but it's pre-fermentation. Whereas with the evaporation process, if you try and get that late hop character with hops, which we do sometimes use, you can draw off a lot of that. So we do look to use hop extracts where we think they're going to be applicable. So we work quite closely with hop companies to try and get the best products that we can then blend into our malt extracts to sort of replicate what would otherwise be missing. So that can
is that like
take
Spectrum? What's tricky?
Spectrum is a particularly sort of popular one. We've worked with Bath House on those. They're really good.
So I guess Nick, it's predominantly the liquid malt extract. So it would be at the end of that process, and then you'd be blending in
Spectrum.
hot
that's
products
right.
type stuff. Yeah.
Is that how you can actually now start to produce these sort of craft hazy kits now because you've got these products available?
Yeah, it's something it sort of just wasn't around in the past. So we can be a lot more tailored to a specific taste. In terms of gaining haze, we can use things like oat extracts and wheat extracts to impart that. So particularly if you're running a 2-can beer kit, so some of our beer kits are single cans, and some of them involve 2 cans. When there's 2, we can mix and match, which gives us another level of flexibility. So we can have one that is primarily sort of your hopped can, so you've got the hop extracts in there, and you've got the other one that will add a lot of your haze or a lot of your sort of mouthfeel characters, either as I say, from oats, from wheat, that type of thing. And then we can choose a specific yeast to go alongside. So we work again with yeast companies to try and supply the best sachet of yeast that will work alongside the beer kit. We can add hop pellets as well. again,
Dry hop.
to dry hop and get a variety or a mix of varieties that are going to work well together.
Sounds like the game's changed then in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so. Maybe it's started to, the kits have actually,
Well,
I
up to
think
5
it's,
years ago, you wouldn't really get many kits that would even really exist in the sort of craft beer style space.
No.
And even with our range, a lot of the historical products are quite traditionally focused. Virtually all the single can kits are focused on traditional British styles or maybe major European or global styles in that sort of commercial beer space rather than being in the craft space. And one of the things that has helped us offer things like the flagship kit is the fact that we can put in different hops, we can put in different extracts, as Nick said, to give different outcomes. That all adds to the cost. I mean, the hops, as you touched on earlier on with talking about the beer, there's a lot of, the more hops you put in, the pricier a kit becomes, and we've got to also place it in a position for an extract brewer that it isn't, so prohibitively expensive they can't brew it. So I see the question come up about the double tin kits are a different mix. They're not all necessarily a different mix, but if you've got the option for the two cans, it means we can build a beer from different products to give a specific flavor profile. So you can't necessarily they're not all two different cans, but probably more and more now, particularly with the flagship ones, we're able to sort of get a product which is closer to a craft product by doing different blends. But yeah, if you buy a 2-can kit and you plan on brewing one half now, one half later, that will be a slight issue with some of those kits.
I mean, I remember some of the beers that my father-in-law, who's a kit brewer, or he was, he brewed a lot of the St. Peter's kits, which I know that you guys make. Some of the ones that they do, are they blends within the tin? Because he has previously expressed a desire to, I'll brew half now and half later. And I keep telling him, don't do that, because that's like eating your peas before you've had your mashed potato, mate. The two mix really well with gravy. Don't be separating them out.
I mean, I'd have to have a look at the products. My feeling is that some of them will be the same product in both cans, so you could essentially do a split brew if you want.
So a mix, but in two different cans. So the same mix in two different cans.
Same mix in two different cans, yeah. I mean, if you go back sort of traditionally, so I don't know how far back this goes, but let's take Andy's point of sort of 5 years ago. Most kits, even though a 2-can, would be the same product in the can. It's 2 cans of that product to produce that beer. So if it was the stout, it would be, 2 cans of essentially the same extract to produce a stout. Where we've taken it slightly away from that is probably more so on the flagship, but not just on those products. It can happen in other kits as well. And that's really, I suppose in a way, that's the inspiration for some of the brewing ingredients range you might have seen. So people like the Malt Miller did some videos on doing different brews with the different extracts in our ingredients range, which previously would have been, a light extra. Our standard ingredients range is a sort of extra light, amber, dark, as it goes up through the range of colors essentially. But the premium ones, which are the oat extract, Vienna extract, Munich extract, sour extract, the wheat extract, Marisotta extract, are a little bit more focused on different things. So, if you wanted to, it gives kit brewers or extract brewers the opportunity to sort of build their own recipe. So I'm just in a question about how you can tell the tins are different. If they have the same numbers,
I like this guy. He's a pro.
I know I'm getting a grilling on the product. But if a tin has the same number on both cans, the same batch identifiers on both cans, then it's the same thing. And if it doesn't, then it's probably.
Can you just piqued my interest about the sour extract?
Yeah.
So, have you soured that wort during the process? Is that how do you create a sour?
Yeah,
extract?
we have, but not through microbiological means. So we add a blend of different acids to recreate the same effect. We really like it. We think it's a good product because it allows particularly home brewer, to create sour-based beers without going near yeast bacteria that can offer that. So it's already made, and you're not introducing those strains into your brewing kit, and then requiring heavy cleaning regimes to eradicate it, or having separate kit for those types of beers.
Yeah, that makes sense, Nick.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a
cool.
lot of development to get the right blend of acids to get the right sourness. It's not
If you use
as
too
simple
much of
as
one
you
type,
just
it can
chuck an acid in. It's quite nuanced in
Yeah.
terms of how to get the right flavour
So it's
profile.
probably like lactic, citric, bit phosphoric, macerate. Yeah. I get you.
We don't want to give too much
There
away.
you go. No.
We just
Give
need
me half an hour and a
episodes.
LCM SMS. I'll tell you what was in it. The other thing is, you guys were kind enough to send out some prizes for the homebrew competition that we did last year, and in that, when I opened it, I mean, I asked my wife. There was lots of expletives. I'm like, Vienna extract, Munich extract, oat extract. What am I going to do with oat extract? And then it's like, all I did was I just put them together in little sets that I thought would be appropriate, and they went out as part of the goodie bags for people who'd won prizes. So thank you very much for supporting us with our competition.
Cool.
That was greatly appreciated. But it was a strange moment when I opened it up, and the first tin, I'm like, this one's white. I don't remember them being oat extract. What? And my missus will tell you I swore a lot. The kids learned some new words at that particular dinner table.
Well, I think it does touch on an issue that a challenge we face really in terms of making these products available, is that it isn't very obvious what you would do with them. So when we look at these products, something like the oat extract, we would foresee maybe being used by either an extract brewer who wants to develop a recipe, has seen an all grain recipe, or even one that's been amended for extract online or in a magazine, and wants to try and create that, but doesn't want to use oats or wants to get some different flavor profile through it. Or all grain brewers who maybe want to add a little bit of something in as part of their grist bill in an extract form, either in the mash or later on in the process, depending on what suits. So the sour is probably the most extreme example of that, in that you could do an all grain brew and add some sour extract and turn that product into a sour without having to go through the microbiological souring route, or you could do it as an extract brewer and pair those tins together. I mean, the sort of 3 to 3.6 kilos of extract equals 5 gallons of beer is fairly sort of standard across the different homebrew products that are out in the market. Even the sort of 1.5 kilo kit plus kilo of extract is designed around that sort of 5 gallon batch size. So it's relatively straightforward to interchange these products, but we've got to work a little bit harder probably just to make it obvious as to what you might do with some of those things, because it isn't completely obvious, as you say, Chris, when you first get it. What do I do with this?
Yeah,
I was very confused.
Could you? I take it you would use a can of normal pale extract and a can of oat malt extract, and then go from there. Yeah, is that?
Yeah, as long as you're going to add your own bittering hops and things. Yeah, and if you're not going to add your own bittering hops, and this is where it gets slightly sort of nuanced as well, because a lot depends on what your process is. If your process doesn't involve any boil or bittering, one of those cans needs to be hopped. Well, it doesn't need to be hopped, but you're not going to get a particularly bitter beer if one of those cans isn't hopped. So if you're going to do the boil and do the bittering yourself, then you can pick any of those cans, because it's essentially just substituting out. I mean, the Munich extract is made from Munich malt. The Vienna extract is made from Vienna malt. So it's essentially a malt extract made from those products. It just becomes slightly more complex if you're going to build your own extract kit, if you like. If you're going to put two tins together, one of them probably needs to have bittering hop in, and that'd be a hop product.
Could you
no matter how much you dry hop?
Yeah, but could you then take that to say 80 degrees, and then put it all in, and then do a whirlpool hop steep then, and
as long as you're going to get enough bitterness from whatever you're doing with the hops, then it's fine. Yeah. It's just that most extract brewers are used to the 2 tins having everything in that they need, or the 1 tin and the fermentables that go with it to have everything they need. So it's probably less of an issue if you've got a hot stage. It's more if you're going to try and come up with your own extract recipes. You need to have some way of bittering that product, either, as you say, through some sort of hot stage, or picking a product which is already pre-bittered.
One thing that I will say, Kenneth, is I think you've just opened yourself up to the requirement for you to do some more work. As in, I think there needs to be on the Muntons website a list of recipes from the appropriate can kits with an appropriate amount of, you could add some incognito at this point and do this and do that and do maybe some recipes on your website to help people out, because there's a lot of people who they don't want, I don't know, just picking a name off the top of my head, they don't want a clone of Boddington's. Not that anybody makes that, why would they? But if you've got like a clone of Boddington's, people don't want that, but they want a bitter, and they want to be able to build their own, and they want to try their own hops. Maybe a little bit guidance for people as to how they add it, what cans they use, and stuff like that. We
do have a web-based app which you can use for that, and I think it might even be on as a QR code on the can. But certainly, and it's probably not particularly well linked from our website, but we can do some work on that. And that was really designed with a whole load of beer styles behind it, so that you can select a beer style, select the sort of hop profile you might be looking for, and it will say pair this can and this can, or this can and this can, and maybe select one of these yeasts. But it does depend on what's available in the market, in your local homebrew shop, in wherever you source your products. But you are right, Chris, that is one of the challenges for us, is to not make this a thing, because these products are, variants of these products have been around for quite a long time. You can go into any homebrew shop and buy a can of light malt extract or a can of amber malt extract on its own without a yeast. But it does open up possibilities to create your own product, and we probably do need to do a bit more work on recipe generation, and that's something that's in our sort of mind going forward, certainly on the social media side as well, in terms of how we can make people aware of recipes they can build with our products. And I think, again, people like the Malt Miller, I think, have got some of them built into their system as well, so you can choose different products within it. But it's a little bit of education. It's a little bit of education for us as well. And the other feedback as well, I suppose, is what products do people want in a can that they struggle maybe with in a grain setting, because we can do different extracts sometimes that allow a brewer to use, say, take oats for example, where you might not want to mash with oats because you might be concerned about how your efficiency is going to be, or how it's going to actually filter through the process.
No, absolutely. I do think that offering these products in the way that you do, and me being as shocked as I was when I saw oat extract in a freaking can, it might just be one of those things where just a little bit of guidance from you guys, a little bit of a push. And if anybody is using those cans, you heard it from Ken, scan the QR code and it'll take you to the app, and you can work things out yourself. But I do think that, that for the extract brewers, because I know that there are a lot of people out there who still do extract brewing, and we tend to focus on this podcast more on the people who are, grain to glass kind of people, because that's what we do. But at the same time, just a little bit of guidance so we can have less badges in beers is basically where we're coming from, because badges in beers is a bad thing.
Badges.
That's a big joke. There's a lot of beers on one particular group that look infected, and the question is always, is this infected?
And it looks like a badger.
Mate, you've dropped a dead badger into your beer. It's infected. Don't drink that.
Yeah. The eternal homebrew question of, is this infected? With the photo of the lid open. Yeah. I've got a question in terms of just your product range, like your beer kits. I've been looking on your website. There's a wide array of beer kits, a lot of different products. Why have you chosen to provide that many different beer kits?
We haven't really. We haven't actively. A lot of it is just built up over time. So a lot of these beer kits, particularly the more traditional styles, have been around for a long, long time. And there are, something like a a Geordie lager is a really popular beer for extract brewers. It does exactly what it says it's going to do. When you brew it, you get great consistency, and the brand has been around forever. So some of it is legacy. I think it's something we have to think about a bit more, and we are thinking about, because there's not many brewers that offer the range of beers that we offer across, or the certain number of brands we offer, and it does add complexity to what we do, and it's something about it does ask us questions about where we focus in future as to how many of these kits really deserve their place on the shelf. I mean, the homebrew market has got a lot of different products in it, and we would like to keep bringing out more products, but in order to do that, we need to make some shelf space, probably, to let some of the other ones who've maybe had their time come away from the shelf. So yeah, I'm not sure it was a conscious decision at any one point to have that many. It's certainly something that's in our mind, and it's really difficult because we love making new beers, and we love, if we work with a new brewery, it's great to get another beer out there. We just got to manage that portfolio, because there's a lot of products there. Having said that, they do go to other places than the UK. So, these are selling all around the world. So it's not as if they're necessarily all on the shelf in the UK.
So you might have one product range that's more popular in a certain part of the world, and
yeah,
and interestingly, I guess you've got quite a spectrum of price points.
Yeah,
like in terms of your Tom Caxtons and your Geordie beer kits versus your assumably your kind of 2-can flagship beer kits. There's a bit of a price differential there as well.
And that's the other thing that's we're aware of in the market, is that we do want to keep homebrew accessible to everybody who wants to homebrew, and that means having products at all different points of the market, not only based on price, but based on the beer flavors people like to drink, the styles people are looking for, and probably more so. And you touched on it a little bit earlier on, Chris, when you mentioned about the 2-can kit brewing. Not everybody wants to do 40 pints of a single beer, particularly a more niche one. So when we launch our taproom products, for instance, we've got to be mindful that those beer styles aren't necessarily going to appeal to everyone, because not everyone wants to do that amount. And it's something that is certainly in our mind about what we offer people going forward, particularly if people want to do a quick brew, which is the benefit of extract, getting something through quickly of, I don't know, half the amount, because the product we make on the tap room, the watermelon sour is a really nice beer, but nobody goes into a pub really and drinks 40 pints of watermelon sour. So
if anybody goes into a pub and drinks 40 pints of anything, they're in trouble. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I would be quite partial to a watermelon sour. That sounds quite nice. Somebody on one of the groups a couple of years ago mentioned a cucumber sour. That sounds shit. But a watermelon sour, that sounds really good. We should get one. I'm going to make a watermelon sour. That's right.
You might have to be quick, because again, those taproom ones are limited edition. So we make a limited amount and then they run through. So I think there is still some watermelon sour out in the market, but the idea is to keep things fairly fresh and just keep them moving, almost like the specials you get in a essentially in a tap room, which was then the name came from.
Yeah, plus if any of those were really, really popular, then you could also look at actually making it a more mainstream product as well.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I don't really like limited editions that aren't limited, because that tends to be then it looks like something you've done to just try and grab the attention. So it is sort of on our mind. What happens if one of these absolutely flies off the shelf and people want more of it? We have to think about why people want that particular style and whether we do something with it. But yeah, it's we do try and keep our limited edition genuinely limited to we're going to make at the start.
It's the DFS sale that lasts for 364 days out of the year, that one, isn't it? Right. I mean, all this talk about tap rooms and stuff has made me crave a commercial beer. So shall we take this one to the commercial break?
Yep. I think we should.
Right then. If anybody needs to go for a wizard or anybody needs a toilet break or anything, now's the time to do it. This is our mid-session break where we go with commercial. And I've got to be honest with you, Nick is sitting there, not really saying very much. He's muted because
sorry.
I assume that his dog is making noise. But I think Nick is one of those. He's one of those people with a quirky underbelly when it comes to his beer choices. He just looks the type. What do you reckon?
Yeah, either that or I'm really mainstream and very vanilla.
He looks like the kind of man who would appreciate a cucumber sour. That's all I'm saying. I'm not casting aspersions, Nick. I'm just saying you look like you should have a beard.
Thanks. If only I could grow one.
You don't know how to take that, Nick. It's all right. Yeah. Chris is very disarming.
Disarming? Is that a new way of saying I'm a twat?
No, well, I didn't want to call you a C-bomb, but I thought
don't do that. We're not
I thought I'd
swearing on
keep
this
it more
podcast.
professional. There was a brewery fairly local to me that I'm pretty sure made a cucumber sour. A few years
Was it
ago.
good?
I think when we went
It
to
was all
BrewCon
right.
down in London, I want to say High Hill Taproom had a tzatziki sour, which was cucumber and
I remember
I presume
that.
not
I've had
garlic,
it.
but
I don't know if
yeah.
it was that particular beer, but I've definitely had a tzatziki sour at London Craft Beer Festival, and it was surprisingly good. To be
I
fair,
think it was. Yeah. I'm pretty
It's a
sure that was
mojito.
the beer that I
it was
tried.
memorable anyway.
Was
Mojito
it?
sour's the way to go.
Was it Siren? Or I thought it was.
I think this
Who's
was
local to
a
me?
pre-COVID festival though that I'm thinking of, so it was quite a long way back.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
I'm keeping that can to one side because that's a banger of a beer.
Speaking of Siren though, that's what I've got for my beer.
Oh, Tricky's jumping in first with both feet.
Well, he mentioned Siren, so I thought I'd take the plunge. So this is one of their 10th anniversary releases. I think the beer's name is actually Exquisite Corpse, which is a little bit odd. Don't know what that's about. Something that says inspired by a surrealist game. Does that make sense to anyone? I don't know what
No.
that's referencing at all. But anyway, so I think the idea with this was that they got various brewers to sort of say one of the elements of the recipe that had to be in the beer, and then it just got passed on to the next person and the next person, and that was kind of the idea behind it, that they would kind of do this collaborative recipe, but nobody would know what it was going to come out like at the end. But what they have ended up with is a 6.9% IPA, which is relatively clear by today's standards. And yeah, it's kind of drinking sort of quite West Coast in style to me, but loads of fruity hop flavour in there as well. It doesn't really give me any details about specifically what's in it, but it's yeah, it's tropical fruit flavour, but also that kind of citrusy bitterness that you'd expect in a Westie, and it's actually really nice. It's one of the one of my favourites out of the 10th anniversary box that I got. The lager wasn't so great in my opinion, but the Impy Stout is actually pretty phenomenal as well. So yeah, there's some really good beers in that box. So yeah, that's my one. I'll let somebody else jump in. Maybe Chris wants to go next. I think
I do, because I've you all know my friend Simon Seaton, brewer, top lad, good bloke. He came around about a week ago now, and he dropped me off a can of Wild Child's Glutinous Maximus. Right, now you will laugh at the name. However, this is a sticky toffee milk stout, and it's exactly what it says on the tin. This thing is an absolute cracker. It tastes like there's a shop not too far from where I work, and they make sticky toffee pudding. Then they wrap it up and they sell it. It's like a sandwich shop. Bakery 164. I'll shout them out because they're top blokes in Leeds, and it tastes like a milk stout that's had a block of their sticky toffee pudding like dropped in and stirred quite a lot. It's just beautiful. It's like caramel notes, there's chocolate in it, there's like a good softness, a good kind of milkiness for the lactose in it. It's a banging beer, and at 4.8% I could go through quite a few. I'll even say it right now, I think Siege of Khartoum has actually got some competition. And you guys know how much I love Siege of Khartoum. That's their peanut butter and banana porter, which is just cracking. This...
Where's the head on it, though, Chris?
It disappeared, mate. It disappeared. It's beautiful. It's really not. I'm going to sit here quietly and I'm going to drink this beer because this is very, very nice.
Nice. I think Keith might have seen what I was drinking, according to the comments. I don't know. I don't know if
Keith Powell's got it, has he?
I don't know if he's seen maybe what I was. Basically, I have got. I'm on the Vault City train here. It is so good. This is. I don't know if I've reviewed another Vault City on the pod during a commercial, but I picked this one up. Stark fruits. It's like blueberry and blackberry. See Vault City's mouthfeel. It is just unreal how creamy it is. It's almost like it just coats like their own's got a Vault City nice. It's just so creamy. It's like, but the sourness just, I don't know, my mouth is watering, but because I want to go back in, sort of thing. It just draws me to just it just goes down so easy. It is the sourness is not. It's not over sour, but it's just got a nice sort of, it is, it's excellent. So if you haven't tried Vault City, go grab some. Definite. All right.
Sweet. Owen?
Go grab some. All right. That was like a real advert. Go grab some. Until Andy started talking about Vault City, I have been drinking a beer from Burnt Mill. Big fan, total fanboy Burnt Mill right now. You probably noticed the t-shirt. Yeah. I'm just like a Burnt Mill advert right now. But it's called Organism, which is the first in a range of beers that they've kind of almost stripped right back. It's a hazy IPA at kind of 6.2%. I think they're going to kind of riff on the standard malt bill and then probably change up the hops. This is all strata made with London Ale 3. It says extra pale and oat malt. So it's pretty simple grist and it's very, very nice. Strata, they seem to really love Strata down in Burnt Mill. I think it is a great hop. And I think it brings so many different complexities depending on how you use it. This isn't incredibly dank, which I think Strata can bring if you use it predominantly, I think, in the kind of late dry hop. But throughout, it's quite passion fruit. It is very kind of sticky, dried mango-esque super beer. Very, very nice. So I'd highly recommend anyone to go and check that out. And the beer that I've just cracked, just because Andy started talking about Vault City, is the Red Fruit Coconut Dream Cake. What a name!
Oh my god!
How many adjectives do you want to add in? It's a 9% modern sour beer.
Yes.
Which I haven't yet sampled, but
So that's
I have
a breakfast
heard.
beer for you, Owen.
Yeah, it's. I might save some for my cornflakes. But smelling it is absolutely bonkers. Coconut, super sweet. Marzipan.
All right.
Yeah, loads of juicy strawberry.
Oh,
it's bonkers. It smells like a sort of crazy strawberry sweet. I don't know. I'm going to cut out there because I'm going to just ramble. Who's going next?
You see, I'll introduce Ken and Nick to the fact that if it was allowed, if we could afford the royalties over every single one of Owen's beer reviews, we would just have "Let's Get It On" by Marvin Gaye being played lowly in the background. If there's any women listening to the podcast, and there are bound to be a few, most of them are very excited when Owen's doing his beer reviews. It's that sexy voice, Owen.
I'll sort of keep it short compared to stripping off slowly whilst doing the beer review.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're enjoying the Burnt Mill, because that's literally across the road from our factory in Stonemarket, the Burnt Mill.
You just chuck the sacks over the road.
Loving Burnt Mill.
I'm really upset. I didn't realise that when I came down to visit you, Ken.
Yeah,
Would have
yeah.
definitely popped in for a carry out. What
You
a schoolboy
missed a
error!
trick. Yeah, this is the second. I think we all got on a few podcasts ago. We all got on a burnt mill order, and
What was it? What was that one called? Cloud
Chamber and
Chamber.
Over the
Oh my
Horizon is absolutely
God.
stunning.
If
They
you guys,
really-
I mean, are you guys both at the same site? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, we are.
Just
We are.
walk over the road to Burnt Mill and get some Cloud Chamber. Like as many cans as you can fit in the boot of your car. Get some. It's a beautiful beer.
And I also drank their West Coast Pale Ale earlier called Lights in the Sky, which is Citra, Chinook, and Brew 1. And again, that is an absolute cracker at 4.8%. Very pleasurable drinking. Super
Right.
brewery.
I think we need to flip a coin just a sec. Right, Nick, it's your turn.
As I said, I'm particularly vanilla, so I'm just on more tribute. I'm afraid. Nothing much to talk about.
Review it for us, Nick.
I'm only
Review
speak
it for
fan.
us.
I'm gonna say.
Give us a full review, top to bottom.
It's citrusy. It's very drinkable. Only 4.2. There's a complex enough malt bill in there. There must be some. I don't know exactly what's in it, but there's got to be some crystal. Probably some Cara too. So there's sort of subtle sort of toffee notes, but nothing that's too heavy. Sits nicely with the hops, and yeah, you could drink it all night.
Which you are
Yeah,
doing.
good. Yeah.
What,
You probably will.
if you were going to suggest one of your kit beers that would be closest to that, what do you reckon that would be?
I don't think we have anything quite down that road. It would be easy to suggest
There's one for
something
development.
like a Yorkshire bitter, but yeah, probably one of our pale ales. But usually they're a bit more sort of contemporary in that they tend to be more sort of like New England style. So I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but yes, there's definitely room for that in the range.
Okay.
And I
Ken?
am drinking Beavertown Heavy Gravity. Beavertown's another brewery that Muntons supplies malt to. I would like to review it for you, but unfortunately I enjoyed the Rocket Lolly, but all I can taste now is strawberry, pineapple, and orange, or whatever was in that. So I'm not getting a huge amount from this one. It's about 6.5%, I think. It's a hazy IPA, so it seems pleasant enough. But unfortunately, I made the mistake of drinking the Rocket Lolly first.
I mean, we can give it 10, 15 minutes, discuss the, let's say, the elephant in the room next, and then we can come back to it for a more detailed review when your palate is acclimatized, if you'd like.
Okay, yeah. I don't know how detailed that review will be, but we can try that.
6.5%. You never know.
Yeah.
So we've kind of touched on this, but the kits, the beers that are made into kits, and how you develop them from recipe to finished kits. You kind of said it was a developmental process, and sometimes you work with the breweries. Was that? I'm correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
as much as we can.
Why isn't there a landlord clone then?
A couple of reasons.
Wow. Yeah, go on, Ken.
Well, there is already a kit out there by a competitor which mimics that kit. It's not a formal sort of landlord one. I can't remember the name of it, but there is one out there. But I think the other thing is that Timothy Taylors tend to use, or certainly did use, a lot of Golden Promise, I believe, and that's not a variety that we malt. Golden Promise is essentially an owned variety of barley, and I forget who owns it, but it's certainly not one that we do. So it would be difficult for us to do a landlord kit and not be able to replicate the grist bill going in, or not very easily be able to replicate the grist bill going in. So that, and I think the other thing is there are a lot of, if we to do more brewery branded kits, I think we'd be erring on the more contemporary side in terms of, and there's nothing against Landlord as a beer; it's a great beer, but we've already got a portfolio which is quite heavily skewed towards the more traditional British beers. So brewery collaborations do take up quite a lot of time and development, and sometimes they don't come to fruition. We've done various ones in the past where I can't quite match what's required. The brewer has to be generally fairly happy with what we're going to put out as a product.
Did you do it? Was it Tiny Rebel? Did you do one?
Tiny Rebel we did a few years ago, and that's still out in the market. Yeah. But it's finding brewers that are comfortable to have an extract kit made. It's finding brewers that are willing to sort of collaborate on that recipe, and us finding a brand that we think adds to the market compared to what's already out there. I'd love to do a Landlord kit, but I think it would be crowded in our range, and as I say, it's difficult for us to replicate it. I mean, essentially, when you asked the question, Nick, of Nick before, when we make the brews to make a beer, we will essentially start with whatever the brewer uses to make that beer. It might need tweaking because once it's gone through the extract process, it can be slightly different. But essentially, that's where we'll start on that process. And the same for all of our beers. They'll start with a recipe that tends to be focused towards the beer style we're producing. We don't tend to blend extracts if we can help it, mainly because the logistics of it in the factory are quite difficult, depending on what's being made at a certain time. And Nick touched on our brewing process earlier on, but our batch sizes are anywhere between sort of 5 and 10 tons of grist going in at any one time. So it's if we're going to start blending extracts, we've got to make more extracts to blend together to make the product. So we tend to go for a more specified grist.
You said 5 to 10 tons of malt.
How big's your fucking mash tun? I'm sorry, I'm swearing. How big is your mash tun?
Yeah, that's huge.
20,000 litres, 30,000 litres.
Jesus Christ!
Like
200
that.
It's probably the 4th or 5th biggest brew house in the UK.
Yeah.
So just a little one then. Jesus Christ!
Andy's just thinking about the size of all that shiny kit there.
And it runs 24/7. I mean, bear in mind this is not just for homebrew, but it runs 24/7. So we have 2 brew houses running 24/7, producing liquid malt extract, some of which goes to homebrew, but others are going into the food industry and other things. So,
Jeez, I remember loading malt into the hopper when I was brewing, and I was I was pissed off at 400 kilos, and you're dumping 5.
Well, this is to be fair, we're not doing it by hand, but this is the other challenge with it, because if we want to do a specific recipe that calls for a percentage of a particular malt, that will probably have to be hand tipped into the process, because although we've got bulk storage for malt, we haven't got unlimited space to carry all the different varieties of malt that we would produce. So if something needs, I don't know, some Crystal 110 and some Carapils or something, that will probably have to be hand tipped in from bagged malt. And depending on, they probably wouldn't form a massive part of the grist bill, but on a 10-ton brew, that's quite a bit of product someone's got to tip in. So
yeah, you're not kidding.
But there must be some the logistics. So there must be some logistics on site to actually take it from the Muntons and then into the brew house as well.
Yeah, we used to take it by lorry, but we now have a conveyor that links our maltings and our brew house together effectively. And the maltings essentially just send malt over into the silos for the ingredients factory.
I apologise for my language, but my God,
it's big.
So if you're doing, say, I mean, just let's work this one out. If I'm going to do, let's say, 5% of my grist as Crystal 120, what's 5% of 5 tons? What are we talking? We're talking 500 kilos.
Yeah, it would be a sizable tip. I mean, we've got
that's
the mechanism
20 bags
to tip it. Yeah.
That's 20 bags, and that's 5%.
I don't do it all. Someone else will help me.
Standing there like the Hulk.
I mean, we can take things from bulk bag as well if we need to. And if something's got a big grist bill requirement for something that's even sort of a relatively rare thing that can be used, we can empty a bin and use it and send it through. But it tends to be that we are, similar to other brewers, we'll have base malts that we're using, and then we will supplement it with different specialist malts depending on the recipe required.
How big's your development kit? What is it? 5,000 litres?
What is it? Size is it, Nick?
No, it's 100 litres.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
hardly
just
worth
one heck.
bothering at that size, is it?
No, but it's enough. But yeah,
probably
having
turn
worked
up-
in
In their
Having
development
worked in
kit,
the
they've got a
malt
B150. That's what they've got.
So just coming back to that development kit, because again, I got to see some of that on the tour, and that was kind of like, obviously your little area was kind of like the homebrewer's sort of dream, really. It was like, oh, look at all this amazing setup there for the pilot brewery and everything else that was going on. But do you sort of brew stuff using the extracts from the very beginning, or are you doing kind of like standard brewing initially sometimes to develop the recipes and then trying to kind of convert that across? Or what's your sort of process as far as that, like, you know, the very first iteration of the beers and how that works?
It really depends what we're going for. So, yeah, if it's a new kit, then typically we'll start with the extracts that are available to us and start with those. And then if we feel there's a big sort of deviation from what we already have that's needed, then we can look to sort of develop a new extract. Developing a new extract is usually sort of benchtop scale. So actually, it's a bit more akin to homebrewing in that, you know, we can use standard all grain homebrew kit to produce a wort, and then that wort can go on a small scale evaporator to make an extract at a small scale, and then we can make that leap up to a factory setting, you know, and run a trial there.
Yeah, because you have the facility to produce liquid and dry malt extracts in your little lab on the
Yeah, we do,
scale.
which sort of works very nicely, really. You know, if all development work had to be done on the 5 to 10 ton scale at any one time, we would.
That's a lot of waste.
We would bankrupt ourselves. It wouldn't be pretty.
You're not going to tell me that sitting on your bench you've got a rotovap and you use that to test stuff out, are you? Oh, give up.
Yeah, now we've got a rotary evaporator. It's
oh my god,
it's a nice bit of kit. Yeah.
I love rotovaps. They're amazing, especially when you get like ethyl acetate in them as well, and the entire room smells like pear drops. It's great. Yeah, yeah. I love chemicals. That's where it stops. But yeah, the other. Let's get down to the meat of this business, right? Because there's been a question on everybody's lips for a long, long time. So strap in, Nick. Strap in, Ken, because this one may push you to your boundaries of acceptability. What is your thoughts on the homebrew kit twang? We know it exists. Everybody said it. Is it a thing? What are your scientific thoughts on this particular subject? Because I have mine. Based on what I've heard so far, they're bollocks. But is this something that you guys can... You take your kit, you put it in, you ferment it out, and then at the end of it, there's this very particular flavour that comes from a homebrew can kit as opposed to when you brew from grain. What is that?
Chlorine.
It's a difficult one. I did a when we were at BrewCon in London last year, I did a talk about some of the extracts, and we touched on homebrew twang because clearly it's something that we are mindful of in terms of its existence and certainly the perceptions it has on malt extract. The real challenge for us is it's so difficult to replicate, and what one person thinks is homebrew twang, other people won't pick up and will have different views on. Is it water chemistry? Is it the extract? Is it the extract, and is it the age of the extract? Is it different cleaning chemicals? It's so difficult to really put a finger on. We don't have any scientific basis to say what it is or what causes it, and we really struggle to replicate it, you know, by trying to do things in our development kitchen or with any kits. And occasionally people will say, "I've picked up this twang in it." But it's so difficult to know whether that's because it's an extract brew or whether in many cases people start their brewing with extract and therefore their processes are maybe not as controlled as they would be later on when they do all grain. to impact on it. So I suppose the answer is we don't know. We would like to know, and I suppose everybody in brewing would like to know, because then once we know what it is, we
Yeah,
can then start
we'd
to
all like
look
to
at
know.
how to deal with it.
We've discussed like VWP. I think is like a big contributor to if you don't wash that. It's great. It's a great product for cleaning. If you've got something that's went a bit funky, then I use it. But then what I'll do is I'll do a percarbonate after and then a star san as well. Whereas some people I think maybe just use VWP because it's a cleaner sanitizer type thing and don't fully rinse it out and then have issues.
These are the same people who like badges in their beer, though. So let's leave that one.
We
I think
can't
that
rule
the whole
out. We can't rule out that the
sorry.
extract plays a part, but we wouldn't know what it is about it that is interacting in that product, in that brew, to cause that. And how do you and also how do you describe it? I mean, when people talk about homebrew twang, they often reference it to extract kits, but when you ask 5 people how to describe it, it's very difficult to describe homebrew twang. Just a sort of, it's a, people make a noise. They go sort of,
I think that's what I was about to say. It's such a vague term, and there's so many variables potentially at play here that there could be
oxidation.
We can break those variables down. Okay, so we can rule out oxidation due to the vacuum nature of the production.
No, but when you put
I'm talking about at the end of the actual fermentation by your typical.
I get that, but that probably
might
explains
there's
why
people
Ken
saying,
and Nick can't reproduce it.
Yeah, there's people saying homebrew twang who are probably talking about chlorine contamination, like we've just mentioned, either through cleaning products or water. There's probably people where it might be that they have got particularly funky tap water and that's doing weird stuff. It might just be the fermentation that's being run in a less than optimal way. There's so many things that could be contributing. I think there's a huge amount of stuff that's getting labelled as twang that is just pick and off flavour, basically. Right?
It feels to me that it's almost a sort of by process of elimination, in that when we put homebrew kits together, we aren't trying to do things wrong. We're trying to make each brew the best it can possibly be, so that the home brewer, provided they do the same, they follow the same steps, they end up with a similar result. So to sort of try and manipulate these brews to give homebrew twang is kind of counterproductive at that time. So almost by a process of elimination, you feel as though something has gone wrong, either maybe with the fermentation, something along those lines, that has developed this flavour that can't quite be pinned down. But given that tasting beer tends to be sort of the whole sort of tasting notes aspect of things tries to pin down particular language so that you get common outcomes with people's tasting notes. You transfer that into a homebrew setting with a lot of sort of anecdotal evidence, and it becomes very difficult to pinpoint exactly what people mean, as Kenneth said, and how they've managed to get that flavour.
One thing that I would like to jump in here, and excuse me, I'm going to go off on a tangent, but then I will come back very quickly, okay? We used to buy tomatoes from Sainsbury's. Chopped tomato. Calm down. Take a breath. Okay? These tin tomatoes used to come and they had no liner on the inside of the tin. Okay? And you got a very different flavour from those tomatoes compared to the ones that we get now, which have got the white liner on the inside of the tin. And Martin and Jack the Cat, could it be from the tin? Have you tried using a lined tin as opposed to just the standard aluminium or steel can or whatever it is that you use?
The tins themselves are lacquered, so there is a lining to the tin, but it's not the white lining you mentioned in the
man knows he shops at Sainsbury's.
But I mean, it's so difficult to get enough evidence to point you in the right direction to find it. I mean, we could spend a lot of time trying to do it. I mean, in a weird way, I hope sometime we find some batch of product we've done and we think, well, that seems to give twang when we've done a trial brew on it or whatever it is. And then you can take that product and say, well, how do I get rid? If I can do that, take that tin which we think gave twang on this product and put it through pressure fermentation in a corny keg, and closed transfers, can we rule out, and if it's fine after that, was it something else? How do you find the thing that you've got to try and work on to get away? Because to be honest, we don't get a huge amount of feedback. Maybe we wouldn't, I don't know, but we don't get a huge amount of feedback on people saying, oh, I tried this kit and it had a real twang. Maybe go back 5-10 years and look at some of the forum posts, you can see that people do have issues with them, and maybe still nowadays people have issues with it. I find it interesting that nobody mentions it ever on all grain. So that is something that I'm interested in, because there are differences between all grain brewing and extract brewing. But then I don't know, by that time you've got a much greater process control over lots of other aspects of the process. So yeah, it's a difficult one. And again,
I don't know, Chucky, can you feel a video coming
dry
on?
hopping?
Hang on, because I've got some ideas on this one. My brain is free flowing at the moment. So, are all of your kits made at the same place?
Yes.
All of your extract, they're all made within the same factory. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, is the water profile controlled?
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, Nick, do you want to talk about the water test, probably?
Yeah, so there's sort of two aspects to this, in that number one, East Anglia is known for having very hard water.
East Anglia,
yeah, not good. But the way we tend to get around that is that we mentioned when we evaporate the wort to make malt extract, we're drawing off an awful lot of moisture, which we can then condense and feed back into our hot water tanks. So we can mash in with that. So that's condensate off the... just seeing that.
We're not responsible for the water in East Anglia, to be fair. So
No.
Yeah,
We're not responsible for it.
Muntons don't produce the water in East Anglia, so that's all right.
Martin is not known for his subtlety. Okay.
So yeah, we're essentially mashing in with RO water in the
distilled water,
yeah, because it's just been drawn off through an evaporation process, through a vacuum process, recondensed and then fed back into the system. We try to be as efficient and
environmentally
there's an element of cold water coming in to blend with it, so it's not completely RO, but it's definitely not fully hard water. As if you were doing it from if you're doing homebrew in East Anglia, you would have much harder water for your brew than you would.
Yeah, Martin's in the same area, so he can appreciate just how terrible that water is. So, okay, we can fairly efficiently, not fully scientifically, but we can pretty much eliminate water. Everything else rests on the person who's actually doing the extract, because you guys are following a standardized process. Some days you get it, some days you don't.
I think the only other thing that potentially comes up is the age of the extract, and that if you ask people to guess twang, they would say, that they I said, funny enough, I said earlier on, if you've got a kit from 20 years ago, brew it, but that may or may not exhibit it. But I think there is a view, and I don't know whether we subscribe to it or whether we can sort of commit to that or not. But there is a view that the older the extract, potentially the greater chance of getting a twang. But then it may just be you're getting more complex flavors coming through from that potential, albeit very slight, sort of caramelization in the can.
So are all of your kits, I'm just running down a list of things that occurred in my head. So all of your kits, are they hopped? Are all of them hopped? All of the malt extracts within the kits hopped?
All the kit ones would be hopped, yeah. Well, yeah,
yes.
the kit ones would, but the
kit ones,
ingredients ones aren't, obviously.
Okay, so the kit ones are all hopped. So it could be an effect of a breakdown or a biotransformation or something like that of a product from the hops within the wort.
Well, we're buying a lot of the time as we mentioned earlier on, the hop products, so they have a degree of consistency within them anyway. That they
Yes, they do. Yeah. Okay.
Transformation is probably not happening so much in the product.
I'm just running through ideas in my head, Ken. I'm not casting aspersions in any way.
No,
shape,
and I
or
think this sort of sums up where we are with it. Not that we're sitting at work every day thinking, "Oh, how do we solve homebrew twang?" But it just shows you the number of things that can come up. Even in the comments, people have sort of said, "Oh, it's this, it's that." Everyone's got their own sort of views on what it might be, and I don't know from your perspectives, how often. When I brew extract kits a lot, I'm an extract brewer. I don't have any sort of full grain capability, and I don't pick it up. And I am brewing with East Anglian hard water in the kit. So, but it's I can't say I've never had it, because there probably are some kits that if I left the bottles for a long time, maybe they did pick up some aspects. But I don't know how prevalent it is. It's mentioned a lot, or mentioned occasionally, but I don't know how much people are having issues with it. It'd be good to know, really.
I think Ken, you hit the nail on the head when you said, well, all grain brewers tend to mention it less. The twang thing seems to be associated with kit brewing, but there is a key unknown variable that in this equation, which is the home brewer.
Yes.
So is twang the generic term for some sort of off flavour created by unknown number of different problems?
Fermentation.
VWP.
That's
or
my
is it
thought.
an infection, or is it tons of different stuff?
We have tried to recreate it, haven't we, Ken, with old kits that have been knocking around.
Yeah, we keep retained samples of our products, so. I think we did it might have been a Wherry or something. Nick. We had.
I think we did a Woodford's, for knocking around from
the most overhyped kit.
Was it a banging Wherry, or was it a straightforward Wherry?
How many kilos of brown sugar did you add?
How many tins of black treacle were in it? That's all we need to know. Was it a banging Wherry or a straightforward Wherry?
I think it was straightforward.
Followed the instructions.
It wasn't an imperial. It wasn't an imperial Wherry.
But in the name of science, we wanted to just sort of brew it as the instructions said, and then see if age played a part. But
I'm disappointed you didn't go for the imperial Wherry. That's what everyone wants to see.
I've not heard of this, but we may have to give this a go.
Well, Nick, apparently, according to one post, which was on Homebrew UK, it's not a true Wherry unless it's got 2 tins of black treacle and half a kilo of, and it has to be Demerara sugar.
Oh, right.
That makes a banging Wherry.
Yeah.
In case that's really
maybe the alcohol level.
Your price per pint. The impact of per pint. If it's not 7.5%, then you failed. But Nick, we were rudely interrupting you.
No, it's all right.
What was the outcome of your aged experiment?
Inconclusive, unfortunately. It would have been really good to be able to say, well, here's a prime example of where we've picked up homebrew twang, and we've got a few homebrewers at Muntons that are fairly sort of familiar with this off flavour, but there was nothing we could definitively say. So the age of the extract, I'm not going to say is not a factor, but in that instance, didn't prove positive. So
couldn't reliably distinguish between the different.
I mean, it's one of those things that I'd love to run through all the possibilities. Or whether it's extract, whether it's hops, whether it's water, whether go through everything. But it's so time consuming that maybe one day we'll find that gradually tick everything off. But to go hard at it to sort of solve these problems for some homebrewers is quite a commitment, and I don't know that we're going to be, resolving that completely soon.
Nick, you'll be up for a Nobel laureate if you find the answer to that every twang, mate.
Oh, wow.
I
That would
think
be a good one.
what's interesting is what sprung to mind is, have you guys run any concurrent all grain versus kit brews and kind of then compared them from a qualitative standpoint?
Yes and no, but they tend to be for other purposes. So rather than say take one of our kits and then try and do an all grain version, it tends to be we've got a particular target in mind, like a show where we want to do an all grain version of a kit and compare them side by side. So the repertoire that we have for doing that has been quite narrow. But again, fairly inconclusive.
Okay, yeah. We'll
Yeah,
talk
we
to me
tend to-
about the
if we
results
do,
when you have done that then.
Yeah, if we do shows, we tend to, and I think we did this at BrewCon in London, and we'll do it at other ones. We will tend to have a tasting mechanic on the stand. You know, a beer that's been brewed in a number of ways from different ingredients, but put to essentially the same recipe to give the same beer. And sometimes we'll ask people to say which one do you think is the all extract, which one's part extract, which one's all grain, which one's liquid, which one's dry malt, which one's all grain. Or we might just say what's your favourite, and they'll choose. You know, and as Nick says, it's relatively inconclusive. Sometimes people can pick out the all grain one, and not necessarily as a preference, but they can say, I think that one's the all grain one. But it's not as if it's sort of, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but it's not like it's 90 and 10%. There will sometimes be a sort of nudge towards the all grain aspect of it. But it tends to be fairly reasonably split. Having said that, depends on what the shows we're doing, because something like BrewCon, you do get a lot of all grain brewers there who will quite often pick out the all grain one, and not necessarily say that's the extract. They'll just say that I think that one's the all grain one, which is quite interesting because, and again, we touched on the process we go through. There are some differences. It's not, we don't pretend that extract kits are going to be exactly the same as all grain versions, because there's so many different parameters in play.
Yeah, no, I guess there's not a lot more industrial processing involved compared to all grain brewing at a homebrew scale, or at any scale, I guess, where you're literally taking the malted grain through a relatively short process compared to your beer kits, which have gone through an enormous industrial process before they're then turned into a beer.
Well, I think also it's not just that; it's the fact that even though the process at our site isn't that long, that it's got to get to the consumer.
Yes,
and when you do your all grain brew, you're going from grain through to your final product in a very short time scale compared to the process of making an extract, going through the quality checks, labeling it, getting it out to a distributor, getting out to a retailer, getting out to consumer. We will work where we can to make sure that we are turning things around as quick as possible, so people are getting extract as early as they can. But it will naturally be longer than the process of doing all grain through to beer.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I've kind of gone back to doing a couple of extract kits to kind of review a couple of your products in fairly recent past, and I guess my take on it, as obviously somebody who's a all grain brewer and then going back to the kits, was it didn't there certainly wasn't like an obvious, what I would think of as kit twang from the beers that I went back to brew, and they were they were the premium kits mainly that I was looking at in that sense. But it did kind of make me reflect on, at the point where I started doing all grain brewing, my experience of actually making beer at that point was very limited as far as doing the kits, and I can pretty much list all the mistakes that you can make when you're brewing that I did at various points or another, and lots of things that I've certainly had chlorine issues from using VWP. There was definitely oxidization going on from dodgy transfers into pressure barrels and things like that, and not knowing about splashing the beer into containers and stuff when you're bottling, or putting it into pressure kegs and all that sort of stuff. And
temperature control, basically a fermenters
yeah,
under
exactly.
the stairs.
Not having the fermentation bucket not in the airing cupboard, but under the stairs without temperature control. So coming back to it with that better understanding of the process and things like fermentation fridges and I mean the kits that I did were going through the same process as I would as far as fermentation and packaging that I would do for all grain beers. And all I would say is really, I felt like I could still tell a difference in terms of maybe the sort of freshness or brightness of flavour that you might get from a kit versus an all grain brew. But that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? It's essentially it's a concentrated sort of, as we were saying, product that's produced on a big scale with lots of those processes going on. And it would make sense that there's going to be a little bit of a difference in terms of the flavour outcome, but not something I would say was twang as such anyway. So
yeah, that's good to.
I will back you up, Chicky, because my father-in-law, prior to his current thing that he's got going off, he was making the Vienna lager, which unfortunately was from a competitor. I apologize. But he was making that on a regular basis, and I would quite happily on a Sunday afternoon let the wife drive home and sit at his house and have a couple of beers with him. There was nothing undrinkable about the beer. There was just, it's one of those things. It's like, I prefer all grain, he prefers kits. It works for him, it works for me. That's kind of the nature of the beast. And I think to kind of sum everything up as far as what we talked about as, the Raiders of the Lost Twang, for want of a better term, would be, I think you've all heard the acronym PEBCAC. Problem exists between keyboard and chair. Well, I think this one is very much a PEBCAF. Problem exists between the kit and the fermenter. I think that is a lot of the issue that we're talking about. And based on my experience of certain brewers, specifically, and I'll call him out because I know he listens to the podcast, Alan up the road, when he makes like some of his kit beers, there is definitely an issue between the kit and the fermenter. So I'll call Alan out every day of the week and twice on Sunday because he still owes me 300 grams of hops.
Look, Alan.
Just to kind of, and I know I'm kind of skipping, but when it comes to your kits, based on your experience, this is probably a question more for Nick than for anybody else. Is there a benefit to treating any of these kits as far as the water chemistry goes, like gypsum, calcium chloride, chalk? What is there any benefit to actually utilizing water chemistry within the production process of the kits?
I'm going to say no, primarily because it really depends where in the country you are. If you take our kit as being sort of fairly neutral from a water point of view, based on the idea that our water is as close to sort of brewing with RO as you're going to get. You then move on to the home brewer and the water they have. I can't give any particular advice as to what works well and what doesn't. It really depends on what you're looking for. But then if you are experienced enough looking at water chemistry, then potentially you could add some gypsum and some calcium chloride, in order to take your water to where you want it to be. But then if you're relying on a homebrew kit, that may not be sort of the aspect of homebrewing that you're currently looking at.
So it's walking before you can run, essentially.
And a little bit. I think looking at water chemistry primarily comes with all grain brewing and taking it from from that starting point. Yeah.
They've already covered that one, Martin.
What about a little bit of Camden tablet, just in terms of
chlorine?
Ruling out chlorine in the water? Is that something that you would?
That's always a good idea.
Always belt and braces even approach sort of thing.
Also covers the VWP problem.
Well,
Yeah.
I would agree with that trick.
It's interesting because the difference between all grain and kit is also blending a little bit on hybrid from the context of what people do after they've, or either during the fermentation or after. So as Nick said, I mean, if your salt addition to the water is about mashing, then it's not necessary in a homebrew kit because we've done that bit for you. But if it's about replicating something in the beer regarding a mouthfeel or some other aspect of that beer style, then it might be something to consider. But I think there's many ways kit brewers can tighten up other aspects of their downstream processes as well to maybe eliminate some of the issues that have been sort of talked about. I mean, until quite recently, I didn't have a keg system, and I've moved to a keg system now, and actually pretty much now pressure ferment in a corny keg with a floating dip tube all the time, and just that lack of exposure to any oxygen on the serving side has made, I think, a difference to my beer. Now, it might just be because I like the fact I can go to a thing and go take a drink off when I want it.
It makes a massive difference.
But I think it is, and I think
easier.
So whilst people focus on all grain and kit from the brewing perspective, I think there are other aspects now that come into play where if there are reasons you don't want to all grain, some people have reasons they do extract kits, and it isn't necessarily about their stage in the brewing knowledge. It's about space they have, the time they have, the funds they have, but investing in that downstream side can also help improve your kit brewing as well as it would improve your all grain brewing once you've created the beer.
If you need any more kegs or any more dispensing equipment, we can recommend a very good homebrew shop for you to go to.
Well, I did actually, as luck has it, buy them from Brewkeg Tap when I brought
them.
So, the trouble is, you touched on this in your episode on cost of brewing. I keep thinking I need more kegs. I don't really need any more.
Of course you need more kegs.
I need more kegs.
Yes, you do.
You see, the number of kegs that you need is N+1.
You don't have a choice. They breed anyway. It's out of your hands now. They'll start multiplying.
You'll wake up one morning, there'll be 4 extra ones in your shed. You won't have a choice, mate. It'll just
they're like gremlins. They just don't get them wet or feed them after midnight.
That's
and
what
you
it
are
is.
going to get them wet. So
Ken, how many have you got now?
I have only got 3 5-gallon and 1 smaller one because I balance the smaller one on top in the fridge. So it'll fit in there. But the trouble is now I'm fermenting in them. That does tie them up a bit as well. But to be honest, I still have the same issue. And one of the reasons I got the smaller keg was I like to do smaller batches of things. I don't necessarily want 40 pints of things. So by using some of those ingredients and playing around with those things, I can get a 10-litre batch, which is fine.
The smaller keg's great as well. If you can transfer from your bigger keg to a smaller keg, and then you can take it. You can take it round to a party or something like that as well. I've got one of those. Yep,
they're very cool. I mean, kegs are just. If ever there was a keystone to home brewing, I think once you've got past all the initial sort of brewing and, whether you're kit or all grain, once you get to that kegging stage, that's the crux. That's where everything kind of takes a massive jump up in quality as well. I may have missed this at the start when you guys were doing your initial chat, but Nick, do you brew as well at home?
Yeah, I do occasionally. It's been a little while since I last put a brew on, but yes, all grain for me.
Oh,
Nick
you
brews every day at work, so really want to.
Well, yeah,
takes the job out of that. Yeah, do you not just nick the work from work and bring it in a fermenter at home?
Well, yeah, I could do. Cut out some of the time.
I believe the correct phrase there is no comment.
5-gallon jerry can.
Oh yeah.
Although let's be honest. Let's be honest. If there's like a 10-ton mash, right? Who's going to miss 23 litres, Nick?
Yeah.
They're not going to miss it. Stick it in
It just does he get to keep his job or not?
Well, turn all cameras off. Now, I think one last question before we let you guys sort of run off and do whatever it is you need to do. Nick clearly deal with his dog. Are there any I know, man. I've been there.
No.
Are there any plans to expand what you offer to all grain brewers as far as the actual grains themselves go, the actual malts? Because I mean, there's a hell of a lot of variety out there on the market, and I've brewed with your stuff. When I was in the brewery, we used to use Muntons malt. Is there anything that you would sort of let us in on as to something that's come into the homebrew market that maybe hasn't been there before, or something that you can maybe go back to your higher ups and say, look, we need to release this because this could be, a homebrew thing?
From a malt perspective, our main focus is to make the malts that we have available to commercial brewers available to home brewers, and that's something that we're working on at the moment. The next thing is, and the big thing for us really at the moment, is working on alcohol-free homebrew in a kit format. And we've done some commercial work on it, and Nick and his team have done a lot of work on it, but it is a different beast to alcohol-based brewing, because things like the hops don't react the same way as they would in a beer, and things like water profile and
Bacteria,
mouthfeel come into play. So, and Nick, I don't know whether you want to touch a little bit on some of the alcohol-free stuff that we're working on, just to.
Yeah, sure. It's a very interesting project in that, infection is the big one that you have to watch out for. But we've been able to address that largely. The most difficult thing is making it accessible for people, because the whole, without a fermentation stage, the whole sort of bottling of it becomes, unmanageable. Really, what you need to do is having it in a keg so that you can force carbonate it. So our offering to the marketplace would need to be suitable, that it could last for a reasonable amount of time in a keg, and deliver a suitable amount of beer. Not everyone perhaps is going to want a large amount of alcohol-free, maybe in future,
but
if it really took off. But
here's my thinking, right? We as all grain brewers cannot really do 0.5% alcohol-free type beers because of the sanitation. If you have a solution, right, that is kit that works, and you've got all those type of home brewers that do have kegging systems there available, then that might be the market that you can hit. You're maybe not thinking about that because that's not traditionally your market. It's more newer brewers, but there's a gap in alcohol-free beers for us as such. Yeah.
I think that is essentially our thinking. We have a commercial product that brewers can use to make alcohol-free beer and low alcohol free beer. As Nick said, alcohol-free will probably have to be a keg-only product, because of the need to force carbonate. But we've done some really successful low alcohol trials on that product as well. So some sort of combination of, if you want to make this fully alcohol-free, do X, Y, and Z and do it in the keg. And if you don't have that capability, because a lot of people don't, you can still brew it as a low alcohol version. And I forget, Nick, was it maybe 1.8%, something like that? It was relatively
up to about 1.8. So trying to tap into that sort of low ABV marketplace.
We've been doing this recent, haven't we, boys, where we'll be doing low ABV, and we've been talking about anything in the kind of 2 to low 3s is good for us. So what you're saying there about 1.5%, that's even less. So yeah, that's definitely acceptable.
6.5, mate. That's low ABV.
For the
just finding
boy.
the way to get it into kit format really is our challenge at the moment. We've got it in a commercial setting. It's just replicating that now into a kit format. But we are on with it, and we're hopeful we can get something resolved on that.
That's good.
What does your consumer research tell you about your the kind of keg versus bottling split?
I don't think we have a great deal of research on it. I mean, my feeling is that the vast majority of extract home brewers probably bottle, and certainly we provide things to facilitate that. We'll do carbonation drops and the other things you'd need for that. But I think it does depend on how available or how much people are prepared to go into the keg side of it. I mean, clearly it isn't just buying the keg, because you have to have some way of cooling it and get you CO2 bottles and things. But if you're prepared, if your next, and it depends whether you view these things as steps in brewing or not, I suppose. But if your next step in brewing is not to necessarily go from kit to all grain, it might be to go to kit to a kegging system, and then it does give you greater flexibility on some of the other things you can do.
So I think to Andy's point, then your no ABV product, you probably want to be targeting the all grain brewers who tend to have kegging systems.
I think it's likely that is the market, but I don't want to. I know we don't do this sort of naturally, but people get pigeonholed into extract and kit, and I think that the keg side of it can be sort of floating around depending on what people are prepared to do. So yeah, I mean, we just want to make it available, and then people can either choose to go alcohol free or low alcohol depending on what they want. I mean, we do definitely see trends towards people trying to cut down on alcohol but still wanting to brew, so it does give some flexibility there.
Yeah, definitely a product I'd be interested in exploring.
One question that we had from the chat was from Brett Harmon, who wants to know: do you have any mixed firm extract kits coming?
We don't.
So, what do we mean by mixed firm?
I'm presuming he means things like Brettanomyces and bacteria and stuff like that.
I don't think we have any live plans for it, but again, it depends on the market size. If we can find a way of doing it, and there are various yeasts you can add at mixed yeast you can add at different stages, I think, aren't there, which might do it.
Yeah,
it's quite niche, I think, from a kit brewing perspective. Maybe not.
Absolutely, it's niche. I was asking the question.
It's pretty niche from an all grain perspective, let alone a kit perspective, I'd say.
Unfortunately, from a product development point of view, you come across things from time to time that pique your interest. And you really want to give them a go, but from a commercial point of view, are you going to sell enough units? Probably not.
You're probably not going to empty that 5-ton mash. You're not going to get anywhere near that, are you?
Yeah, that's precisely it. But I did notice that Fermentis have released a small yeast sachet. I think it's about sort of 2 to 4 grams, something like that, of Brett yeast. That's specifically for bottle conditioning. So that would be a very interesting product to try alongside current kit processes. So you could throw that in to the fermenter, bottle it up, and see what it does. I've not tried it yet, so I really can't sort of give an opinion on it, but I'd like to give it a go.
Sounds like a plan. Brett wants to know: is there going to be aged hops in it as well? Because apparently he's a fan of cheese. No.
Again, it's maybe a bit niche, but yeah, we'll see. Depends how old our hop stock gets.
The cheesy hop extract kit.
Yeah, Camembert is optional.
That's a great name for it.
I think Camembert is optional. There you go. There's your name, trademarking it.
That's your niche corner of your market.
I think I can speak for the other 3 lads on this pod when I say that this has been a real eye opener, and it's good to know that the homebrew twang, which, let's face it, is a popular topic on a vast majority of Facebook groups and forums around the world, is something that befuddles even you guys because you can't replicate it. So
if we could replicate it, we'd deal with it. I think
just leave it at that, Nick. Just leave it at that. There's nothing else that needs to be said.
That's a strong statement. That's a strong statement.
And to be fair, it's not far off. Well, it is bloody accurate. So, I don't know. Does anybody else have any further questions to add? There's been nothing else in the chat aside from somebody saying that dippers are alcohol friendly.
Do you know? I'm just actually quite keen to try out a kit again, just to see if the processes what I've got in place now would produce a decent beer or not. So, yeah, it's definitely.
Are you asking for a free kit?
Well, if you want to send one, then yeah.
that was a very obvious fishing
You've got to do a review video though.
The best bit is
Yeah, that's fine. I've got a YouTube channel that I could do.
you'll get some great YouTube clips from
sexy brew footage.
You'll never have seen a
out in
sexier
an
video for
extremely
your
expensive
kit beer, to be fair.
SS Brewtech.
Hollywood production value.
Nick, if you haven't checked out the High Road Brewery channel on YouTube, it's like Hollywood quality production. It is incredible.
Cinematic, yeah. Cinematic brewing footage.
It's very, very good.
It'll be under, if you just search Andrew Lynch as well, it'll come up, but yeah.
No, we are keen for people to try kits, go back to them, stay with them. If you're running out of time, you want to do something quickly for a party, try a kit. They are different from what people imagine kits to be when their dad or granddad did them, whenever it was. So I think try the kits and give us some feedback. You can get in touch with us through the website or
it's funny you say about granddad. I always remember my granddad being like, "Oh, the stout one was the best one."
You can't really go wrong with a stout. You can't oxidize it. You can't really screw it up. They're a great kit to do. Yeah. I personally was always more of a fan, and especially when it came to the kit beers of the bitters. I always like bitters from a kit. They once you've aged them a little bit in a pressure barrel, they always taste very, very good. So, and another thing as well, and it's just jumped to me, is the difference in quality between kits 5 years ago and kits now is huge. There's so much more variety on the market. There's so much more.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
it's like everything's just taking this huge step up in quality. And I mean, not to blow smoke up your collective arses, but I do believe that a lot of it comes from Muntons with your sort of your kit values essentially.
Well, I think we work in a market where people generally make good products. That's the thing as well. You know, and our competitors make good products. It's offering things that people want. It's trying to find the things that people want to brew and making sure we can get them to people in the time they can brew them. Quality improves for a number of reasons. I mean, technology improves. I mean, you go right back to when the first extracts were made, and there was no vacuum evaporation to a degree. It was just basically cook the moisture off, and it was very much darker. And technology moves on, and we put a new evaporator in year and a half ago, a couple of years ago. I think maybe Richard, when you came, it'd been in, but these are high tech bits of kit designed to protect the product as much as possible. So anything we can do to get it to the consumer in the state that it would be as close to all grain as we can, then we'll do it. But I think it's great to be involved in homebrew. You know, we got great competitors, great suppliers, great other people involved in it, and it's exciting.
Just to kind of make Andy feel a little bit better about having to rewire his entire house when he built his last brewery, how much was your evaporator when you fitted it? Do you have like a ballpark?
Oh, what, in pounds?
Yeah, in pounds.
Millions. I can't remember off the top of my head.
There you go, Andy. You got away lightly, mate.
Probably a little bit more than Andy's rewiring.
Yeah. Less than $7,000.
It was more than that, I think. Yeah.
One final question from the chat before, just because you might have another commercial customer potentially there.
Yeah, bit of both. You can get our malts through some distributors, or you can contact one of our malt sales craft brewing sales colleagues. So if you go on the website, there's an inquiry form, and someone will get back to you and let you know. I mean, we sell direct to commercial brewers, and we sell through distributors to commercial brewers, often depending on where they are and the amount they need and bits like that. So
he's about 10 miles from Owen, so he's in Southampton.
Yeah, that's Maverick Brewing.
Yeah, Maverick Brewing, hoddy on a poddy.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Gentlemen, I would just like to say thank you very much for joining us, because this has been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. And if you do have any more products that are coming to market, anything which is like truly groundbreaking, and you want to come back on, tap Tricky up, because you are more than welcome, both of you. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, really happy to come back on.
Thanks very much. Interesting podcast.
I'm just pissed off that Nick's dog didn't make an appearance, because I love dogs.
If
you'd have had the dog sat on his lap, it'd been great.
Show us the dog. Show us.
Yeah, where's the dog?
He's remaking his bed again. So
He's chewing on the
Rattling
bed
around.
again.
Nick
isn't
hasn't
he?
got a
Yeah,
dog.
yeah.
You
Is
just
it
have
a
to
Labrador?
pretend from the start that there's a dog there.
Brilliant.
It's the missus.
Oh dear, that's harsh.
They've got a pretty
Here he comes. Here he comes. Here he is.
Hey.
Yay! There's the dog.
He's the real
Hey.
Is it a whip or a ground?
He's a whippet. He didn't like that very much.
Yes.
Sorry.
Whippets, proper Yorkshire. Right. Thanks very much, guys. I'm not even going to
Brilliant.
say that, Brett. You can pack that in. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been superb. And I think we can say, are you guys available to stick around for sort of 10, 15 minutes? Because you might have some questions in the after party.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I am.
Is that cool?
No problem. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no pressure if you want to.
If you want a jacket, then feel free. But
Yeah, but the other thing to note, Chris, is just for the recording to upload to make sure that clears before anyone jumps off.
yeah, can we do the thanks very much and goodbye before we get to the technical part, Andy? Right, thanks very much for joining us. Episode 67 of the Hop Edition is in the bag. I hope you really enjoyed this information because I really, really did. We didn't quite get to the bottom of the homebrew twang, but I don't think we ever will. Thanks all to all our Patreons. We really do appreciate you guys, and thanks very much to our sponsor, Brewcake Tap, who apparently is even used by people who work for Muntons. So
There you
well
go.
done, Johnny. And we will see you very soon for episode 68, and it's going to be a good one. Depending on how you think, it's definitely going to be a good one. So thanks very much, and we will catch you guys soon. Say bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers all. Thanks again. Thanks, Nick.
Right, that's Tricky's little bit for him to be able to edit the podcast. Now, for everybody who's currently on the live chat in YouTube and on Facebook and wherever you are, and even on Discord, we're going to throw up a Jitsi link. We're all going to wait for our relative audios to upload through StreamYard, and then we're going to jump onto the Jitsi link, and you guys can ask these guys any questions that you want while we're not online. But please, Brett, nobody wants to see your pussy. All right? Nobody wants to see that. We're just putting that one out there. So, at this point, I'm going to click end broadcast. Oh, no, I'm not. I need to put the Jitsi link in, don't I? Oh, God, I hate this bit. Why don't I ever
You'll
just
have
set
to
this up?
walk us through what we've got to do because I've no clue what you're talking about now. With
Don't worry about it.
Don't
I'll
worry.
post the link. All you need to do is click it.
Just
Yeah.
a link for a separate video chat, basically, because we can't get everyone onto this.
Okay, I will post this on both Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to join us, that is the link in the chat for you to click. It's a random generated name by Jitsi Me. Don't ask. If you guys want to click on that, don't leave this particular StreamYard video until your audio is finished uploading. So, oh, well done. Whoever clicked that. Good job, Tricky. Yeah, so I'm going to end this now. And thanks all for watching, everybody else on YouTube. We love you all. And get your names in for my beer because we've got to send a fermenter out to somebody soon. Right. I'm ending the broadcast now.